The logic of destroying my husband's life. I sat at my desk, occasionally glancing at my watch and at the notes of the prepared speech in front of me. It was just a habit now. I knew the words I wanted to say by heart and had been doing so for weeks. I knew that what I was about to do was a considerable risk, but I felt obliged to do it. I was sorry it had come to this, but the stubborn asshole I called a husband had brought the trouble on himself. What choice did I have? Would my husband like what I was up to? No, I knew he liked to always be in control, and I was going to take away all choice and bend him to my will. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for him to come home. He couldn't know about the ambush I'd prepared for him. I know what you're thinking. I wasn't going to sit him down and announce that I had a lover, and insist that he either go along with it, or I was going to kick his ass out and clean every last dollar out of him. Well, you're wrong. And I wasn't going to announce that I was divorcing him or demand a trial divorce so I could make love to others. Before you ask, no. I had no desire to knock him out, only to tie him up and humiliate him by sleeping with his best friend. And don't insult his integrity by assuming I was there to announce that I found out about his affair, so I set out to get revenge. My husband, the most loving, sweet, but above all loyal man I've ever met. No, this was a different kind of ambush, a more literal one. I glanced over at my accomplice, Matt 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and tattoos, who was staring blankly at me from where he was idling in the bedroom doorway just outside the main entrance. Well, I didn't pick him because of his mental capacity. I glanced at the clock again. It was almost showtime. As if on cue, I heard Dave turning the keys in the front door lock. I nodded to Matt and watched him disappear into the shadows. I put on my best smile. Dave opened the door and without looking in, closed it behind him. It wasn't until he turned again and took 2 steps in my direction that he looked up. His face immediately stretched. Karen, what are you doing in my apartment? At that moment the aforementioned 6 feet 4 inches muscle man of gore stood behind my husband and clamped a wet rag over Dave's mouth and nose. I sadly watched Dave struggle, truly alarmed at how long this was taking. In the movies, those who were drugged with chloroform immediately passed out. In reality, my husband was struggling and thrashing and his eyes were spinning trying to see his attacker, but the huge biker knew his business. It must have been at least 2 agonizing minutes before Dave changed tactics. He seemed to relax for a moment, then lifted his right leg and stomped down. I think he intended to kick Matt in the leg but was mistaken. Instead, his boot slid down the biker's shin. I cringed at the reflected pain as even I as big and stupid as me wrinkled my nose. Quick as a flash, Matt's plan was discarded. Letting go of Dave with one hand, he spun him around and slammed his fist under my husband's chin. Dave saw it coming but was too weak to defend himself. Finally, I watched as his eyes slowly rolled back and he collapsed in Matt's arms. Well, embarrassing, but the effect was the same. In well-rehearsed coordination, Matt and I lifted my lying husband and carried him to the master bedroom. 5 minutes and 4 ropes later, the job was done. I thanked Matt and paid him the last $200 I owed for the task. He pocketed it, then walked out the door, patting himself in his pocket to make sure he had the lock picks. I sat on the edge of the bed and gazed lovingly into my husband's face, stroking his forehead. Why is he turning blue? It suddenly occurred to me that unconscious and lying on his back he had swallowed his tongue. I tried to open his mouth, I don't know why. I must have tried to grab his tongue. He didn't open more than a little bit, so I put my hand under his neck and lifted it a little. I could hear and feel the air rushing into his lungs. I slowly relaxed as the coloring returned to his face. Now all I had to do was wait for him to come out of his mat-induced fainting spell. It took another good 10 minutes before his eyes started to blink. I just sat there and stroked his forehead. Finally his eyes opened completely. After a few seconds he tore upward but the ropes pulled him back. He was shaking his head from side to side, looking at his entanglements. Finally, seeing that he was helpless, he stopped thrashing and just started yelling help as loud as he could. I had anticipated this, so I hit him as hard as I could to stun him a little, and then reached for my pre-prepared gag. I was hoping we could talk like civilized people. But if you're going to act unreasonable, we're going to have a one-sided conversation. As I finished tying the gag, I stopped and took another look at the face I had loved for 23 years. I took a deep breath and mentally visualized my notes. And now, darling, something was wrong again. It looked like he was unconscious. Come on, I didn't hit him that hard. His eyes rolled back and his body felt like it was vibrating. Thinking that my slap had triggered something, I just sat there watching this strange behavior. In a panic, I thought I could undo what I had done by hitting him again. I jumped up, settled on his chest, and brought my hand in to administer the medication. I'm sorry, darling. That wasn't what it was supposed to be. My body was suddenly flung to the side as someone kicked me to the floor. I looked up and to my surprise I saw another woman. She was a little taller than me and quite beautiful, with fiery red hair. She was much younger and clearly healthier, just like I was before my athletic body relaxed a bit. I found myself pinned to the floor in some sort of wrestling or fighting hold. The pressure around my throat allowed me to just breathe. I knew that just a little more would change everything, so I let my body go limp and just stared into her striking green eyes. Let me go, you fool, I need to talk to my husband. I'll let you up, but not to talk to my boyfriend. I want to see what's wrong with him. Try to interfere and believe me, I will break both your arms. I've called the police, so go or stay. I don't care, do you understand? The pressure continued until I nodded in agreement. She jumped up and looked at Dave. His condition remained the same. She quickly put her head on his chest and listened. I saw the color peel away from her beautiful face. Then she jumped up, grabbed the phone and called an ambulance. As soon as she hung up, she grabbed a knife and cut Dave's restraints, yelling at me to help herd him to the floor. I started to panic. What's going on? I don't know. His heart is beating, but it's not beating right. I can't do CPR on the bed. What did you do to him? My friend knocked him out, but he had to. Dave just didn't want to pass out from the chloroform. The tall redhead went silent again, listening to Dave's chest. Why did you chloroform him? Is this your way of getting him back? That's a good plan. No, I know he'll never come back to me, not after what I did to him. He's too proud for that. Further discussion was cut short when two police officers burst into the apartment. The redhead quickly told me what had happened, and one of the policemen quietly arrested me. As I was led to the door, anxiety, terror, but most of all frustration just overwhelmed me. I just wanted to tell him why. He should have listened to me. He should forgive me. I was taken to the police station and put in a cell for a few hours. They offered to call a lawyer for me, but I knew I couldn't afford it. I spent almost all of my savings on divorce lawyers until I accepted that Dave was gone forever. I was still terrified. What if Dave is dead? Then I would never be able to explain why I did what I did, and I would never get his forgiveness. Finally, I was taken to an interrogation room. Two detectives sat me down and turned on a tape recorder. I didn't see anything wrong with agreeing to be recorded during the interview, but that was all I was going to do. To the first three questions I simply replied. I refused to answer this on the grounds that it would tend to incriminate me. Two of the detectives were discussing getting a lawyer for me when there was a knock on the door. The third detective poked his head through the door. The girl is here and wants to talk. With obvious distaste, the first two detectives left and the tall redhead entered the room and sat down across from me. My name is Wendy Dormer, by the way. Is Dave okay? He's going to live, no thanks to you. Your little chloroform trick gave him a cardiac arrhythmia. The doctors say he'll be fine until his heart rate gets above normal, and then he'll just pass out. They're going to let him rest for a while and then stop his heart and restart it. There's a 90% chance he'll go back to normal. Otherwise, it's a pacemaker for the rest of his life. Breathing a sigh of relief, I took the opportunity to look at her. She was statuesque like a bimbo, with a body I would have been happy to have at her age. One look into her eyes told me that while she surpassed me in all physical aspects, I had an advantage over her intellectually. I wondered why she was here. She answered for me. Look, Karen, this has to stop. When are you going to finally realize in your stupid head that Dave doesn't care why you did something nasty to him? He just wants to get a divorce and move on with his life. But he has to listen to me. No, he doesn't. You want to tell him, but there's no law that says he has to listen. From what he told me, you two had a normal life until he came home and found you having sex with another man. He said he thinks you've given up on the marriage and he wants nothing more to do with you. But he should just listen to why I did what I did. I know it's over between us, but he has to forgive me. After he left, I tried calling him, but he wouldn't answer. It was the same with emails. They just disappeared into the ether and I never heard from him. I sent him an email and he just returned it unopened. I even tried writing a registered letter, but he refused to accept it. God, it's so frustrating. I tried harassing him at work, but he just plugged his ears and refused to listen, and then called security. I tried to explain it to his mom, but she just called me a cheater and hung up on me. I even tried to get my mom and dad to intervene, but they said they wanted nothing more to do with me. It was painful, but not as much as when my own children refused to talk to me. My last attempt was to refuse to sign the divorce papers, unless he sat down with me one-on-one. He just stopped the process. It's so frustrating. If I could just tell him why I did it, then we could all move on and people would just start talking to me again. What people? Anyone. Yeah, I realize this is going to be uncomfortable. Let me tell you that Dave was disappointed that the kids made that decision. He tried to tell them that they shouldn't judge you, that the crime you committed was against him, not them. But they are adults now and can form their own opinions. They are good kids. They and my two get along very well. When did you see them? Did you go to Sydney? No, they were here last week. They're on vacation. She missed the news that her own kids were in town, but hadn't come to visit. Look, Karen, if it will save Dave's life and keep you from doing this bullying thing again, I'll be happy to hear you out now. I promise I'll try to get Dave to listen to me. I seriously considered her offer. I stared at her innocent, slightly expressionless expression. I had nothing to lose but everything to gain. The police had only circumstantial evidence, and only Dave was a direct witness. I knew I could count on his good nature and he wouldn't press charges against me. If that fool tried to make a statement, I would just deny it. In my business life, I had two dumb fools like her before breakfast every day. I decided to enlighten her on one of the minor excuses I had prepared. Okay, I hadn't been with guys when we got married and I always thought I might have missed something. Yeah, Dave thought it might be something like that. But he said he married you at your insistence. He said he gently pressured you to give in. He even said he flagged it as a potential problem even back then. I agreed with him that it would be extremely unfair to use that as a reason when it was your choice then. Wendy's intervention caught me off guard. She was acting a little more forcefully than I had expected. It wasn't a surprise for her next statement. And don't try to tell me you were just getting even for Dave playing away or neglecting you. The kids told me that as a kid, he was always attentive to you and spent all his free time with you and them. Don't try to tell me he cheated on you first. I know him well enough to tell you that he is the most loyal, trustworthy, honest, and respectful man I have ever met. It would never occur to him to disrespect you. That is, until you threw him out. This woman was starting to piss me off with her naivete. I knew my voice was louder and shriller than I wanted it to be, but I didn't care. Well, that was the problem, wasn't it? Respect. I have a college degree. Dave never finished high school. I was climbing up the ladder after taking care of kids for 10 years, and no one said anything. Dave gets promoted to foreman, and everyone thinks he was elected president. I socialize with smart business professionals who drive BMWs and dress nicely. He hangs out with sweaty blue-collar guys who drive Fords. He eats what he likes and still looks hot while I'm on a diet, and still look like a chubby middle-aged housewife, even after a facelift and breast augmentation. Everybody loves Dave. Everybody respects Dave. Everyone wants to be with Dave. I hate it. I paused to try to lower my voice below the squeal I knew it had turned into. Even when I was promoted to band manager last year, all my parents could say was that with all the money they'd spent on my education, they'd expected nothing less. But that didn't stop them from raving about Dave's award. I make more in 3 weeks than Dave's award does in an entire year. It just wasn't fair. That year I spent a fortune on hair, makeup, and a dress for my company's Christmas party. I show up and all I have to say is, "Where's Dave?" Do you have any idea what it's like to know that you are socially, financially, and intellectually superior to your husband, but your own parents seem to love him more than you? Do you? Wendy shook her head. Karen thought she hated Wendy more than anything else in the world. The athletic girl at school who picked her boyfriends. The empty-headed types who swirled around her husband at parties and laughed at his crude jokes while she tried, but unsuccessfully, to impress people with her knowledge and intelligence. The ones that agreed with him whenever there was a controversial issue, even when her arguments were superior. Not just the women but all the guys. The final humiliation was when, after one argument, Dave stood up to defend her from the crowd. The argument was about being a stay-at-home mommy. Dave immediately began extolling her virtues as a mother who selflessly sacrificed her early career to give her children what they needed. A loving, caring environment. His comments about how well she cared for her two children should have brought them closer together, but had the opposite effect. She, the group manager, should be rescued by the foreman. Well, after a while I really started to resent her. Every time I tried to prove that I was better, at least in some way, it backfired. Just made me look uncompetitive, and even worse, made people rally around Dave. Eventually I decided there was only one way to get rid of Dave. I would have a lover. If I could keep the affair a secret from Dave, it would prove that I was better than him just for me. If I could find someone who was a better lover than him, who gave me more pleasure, then I could secretly humiliate him so he wouldn't find out. Well, that wasn't much of a problem, was it, Karen? Dave is so open and trusting that you could make love to a guy in bed next to him and he wouldn't notice. How long did it last? 3 guys in 6 months. Wow, Dave thought this one was the only one. Was it what you were hoping for? Not really. Sure, it was nice to get love from them and from Dave and successfully hide it. But the sex was awful. Because I was so inexperienced when I got married, I had no idea that Dave was bigger and better than most men. Guys didn't care about my pleasure. It was just bam bam thanks mom. I only went out with the first 2 a couple times. The third guy I worked with was the only one even remotely up to Dave's standards. So why didn't you dump him? Because if I did, Dave would win again. Huh. I felt like I had to keep going until I had better sex with someone than I had sex with Dave. Then I could retire knowing that I had better sex than Dave, and I could stop knowing what Dave would never do. I was teaching the third guy, John, everything I liked best. I could see that this logic just didn't fit in Wendy's head. Serves you right, you idiot. You should be focusing on your husband instead of making love to the entire soccer team. So what happened, Karen? What you're telling me right now doesn't fit with what Dave told me. He thought you wanted to get caught. That's why he came home at a normal time and found you having sex on the couch. Of course I didn't want to get caught. I knew Dave would kick me out if he ever found out. I realized that John would never get me where I wanted to be. So I came up with another plan. Dave made love to me a couple times a few hours after I was with the other guys. It was a little hot, but still not what I wanted. I made the mistake of reading some humiliation stories online. There was one story about a woman who forced her lover to sleep with her, and then forced her husband to make love to her after a while. This story hit a nerve with me. I knew it was what I was looking for. If I could pull this off, my obsession would go away. No matter how inferior I felt since then, I would remember Dave humiliating himself that day. So I took Monday off and invited John to come over in the afternoon. The plan was for him to give me at least 2 good lovemaking sessions just before Dave got home. I set my alarm for 4:45, knowing that Dave always gets home at 5:30 sharp. I was about to lie down on the couch and take him out to lunch when he walked in. It was just my luck that for the first time in years he came home early without calling. I paused, realizing that in my anger and desperation, I had strayed wildly from my script. He didn't actually come home early, Karen. If you had gone to work that day, you would have realized that you and Dave had forgotten about the start of daylight saving time the day before. He got to work an hour late but left at the usual time. He said he called and left a message on your cell phone. I really don't understand why you thought all this was necessary, Karen. I talked to Dave a lot about this while helping him heal. And not once did he ever let me know that he thought he was above you. In fact, he worshipped the ground you walked on. As for your parents, when I talked to them, I always got the impression that except for this one instance, they were very proud of you. Yeah, I know that now. I realized that most of it was in my head, but it seemed so real at the time. That's what I wanted to tell Dave from the beginning. But the stubborn asshole just wouldn't listen. So you came up with this little plan to get him to listen to you. How was it supposed to go down? Well, I found out where Dave lived and hired a friend to help me tie him up so he'd be forced to listen. I bought chloroform online and broke into Dave's apartment. When he got there, this guy was supposed to give him the chloroform and help me tie him up. It turned out badly though. The chloroform didn't knock him out and he started pouncing on the guy. My hired help had to knock him out with his fist. Then we tied him up. But just as he started to come to, he had a weird seizure. I slapped him to get his attention and then you burst in. You're gonna keep your promise, aren't you, Wendy? Will you tell Dave why I did it? Before I answer that question, Karen, I just wanted to ask how you think your plan turned out. Well, Dave won again, didn't he? I've lost my job. All my friends and family have abandoned me, and even my own kids don't even talk to me when they're in town. Meanwhile, Dave is being victimized. My reputation is in shreds. I'm damaged goods. If I ever want a date, I'll have to leave town. Dave has women lining up in case I break up with him. No chance, Karen, I recognize gold when I see it. Now back to your question. I'm not gonna tell Dave about your logic for ruining his life. Honestly, I didn't understand a word of it, and I can only see that it would hurt him even more. Maybe someday when he's stronger, I'll slowly feed him, who knows. As I called her a treacherous fool, I noticed that she was rotating the index finger of her right hand, pointing it at the ceiling. The meaning of what she was saying became obvious when the door opened and two detectives entered the interrogation room. One of them walked right up to the tape recorder on the table, pressed stop and pulled out both tapes. Well done, Sergeant Dormer. Unusual tactics, but a clear confession to breaking and entering, assault, conspiracy, and unlawful restraint. Let's see how Mr. Brown behaves after the operation, what other charges we can bring. Thank you, Rex. I know Dave's gonna hate this, but the only way he'll be able to relax after this is if that crazy cheater is safely behind bars. She turned around just before she got to the door. Karen, when you come out, please respect Dave's wish to never see you again. I was too stunned to even respond. Am I not smarter than everyone else after all? The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.